Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to our October. Cannot believe it's already October. This year is flying by. Our October virtual user group. Today's topic is improving your data quality with Python. I'm Shay Bagwell. I'm your host for today. I also have Santosh and Steve with me today, who are going to be your presenters. They've got a lot of great material lined up for y'all and a lot of great content. So a few housekeeping for today's webinar. The webinar is being recorded. The recording will be made available to you by tomorrow. I will send it out in a follow-up email, so you will receive it that way. If for some reason you missed my email, you will also be able to find the recording on our YouTube channel, as well as our ibi.com under the resource section. The recording will be posted there. So 3 ways that you will be able to access this recording after the webinar today. If you have any questions for Santosh or Steve during their presentations, please utilize the Q&A feature. They will be monitoring that throughout the presentation and throughout the time with us today. So submit your questions, don't be shy, and we will get those answered. And with that, I have a couple of marketing things to talk to you guys about. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a few minutes of your time, and then we'll dive into Santosh and Steve's presentation. So as I said, today is improving data quality with Python with Santosh and Steve. All right, so a couple of marketing updates for you guys. As a lot of you are aware, earlier this year, we launched WebFocus 9.3. We were able to showcase the 9.3 environment on our road shows that we did this year. So we did a 4-city stop where the attendees got to play in the environment and have some hands-on training in 9.3. If you weren't able to attend any of those road shows, no worries. You can head out and check out the launch playlist and see some of the new demos that are out there. So if you're interested in, what 9.3 has to hold and what new features are in 9.3, make sure that you do check out the playlist and see some of the demos. Education. You guys have been asking for it for a while. So our marketing team is working very hard behind the scenes to bring you the IBI education and training that you guys have been asking for. So with that, with the new platform, we will have training and education in the 3 different platforms around mainframe analytics and data intelligence. We will have stuff starting from a basic 101 new user to more of an expert level or advanced level, and then even an expert level. So there will be more to come about education. I just wanted to bring this to the forefront to let you guys know we are almost done with it. It is almost about to be launched. And if there's any particular education courses that you are hoping to see or that you specifically would like to have, feel free to shoot us a note, send something to me, post it in community, give us your feedback. We'd love to know, make sure that we're covering all the topics and the courses that you guys are wanting to see. So more to come on education. IBI.com. If you haven't been out to the new website, please make sure that you are out there visiting. This is where you can find all things IBI. We gave it a nice little facelift. It's got a new look. It's looking wonderful. And out here, you can find all of your product documentation. This is where you will be able to access the training and education information that will take you to the new training and education platform. You can submit your support tickets out here, and then of course view all the upcoming events, including in person and the on demand. So the Focus Fridays and these virtual user groups are also posted out on the website. We also have a lot of our customer stories out there. So if you're interested to see what other organizations, how they're using the product, be sure to check out and read about their use cases. Upcoming events. So we did wrap up our roadshow for the year. So as of now, there are no more in-person events for 2024. We are working very hard behind the scenes to get 2025 up and planned, and I cannot wait till we are able to make the announcement to you guys of what 2025 is going to look like. I promise you guys it's going to be worth it. But in the meantime, to finish out the year, we do have quite a few virtuals going on. So again, this month we held the Focus Friday last week. Today is the virtual user group for October. These both will be on demand. And then coming up for November, we have our November Focus Friday as well as our November virtual user group that are open for registration now. So if you want to head out to the website, you can register for those two events coming up next month. The virtual user group will be around DSML, and then Walter and Greg will be hosting the November Focus Friday. Community. A lot of you guys still haven't heard or know that we have a new community up and running. This is the new IBI community. This is IBI only. We are no longer in a community with TIBCO. This is all IBI specific, our products, our customers. So if you guys are interested or don't know about it, make sure that you head out there, check it out. It's a great community, a lot of action going on out there. We have the forums where you can split by the IBI product. It's very user easy to find all the products now. The Q&As that are going on, ask your questions, get your answers from our experts. Our experts are also posting articles and cool like demos and how-tos out there, as well as the peer learning. So learning from each other. You guys are asking each other questions, and those conversations and those threads are active on community. So be sure to join the IBI community if you haven't yet. And then stay connected with us. We want to make sure you guys are staying in the know. If you are not receiving our monthly newsletter, or you are not receiving the invitations to the virtual user groups or the Focus Fridays or the Summit Roadshows, please let us know so we can check and see what's going on. If you are opted in, if somehow you got opted out, or if you're just not on our mailing list at all, and you do want to receive these, please send me a note, let me know, and we can take a look at that for you. But make sure we want you guys to know what's going on with IBI. And then the other option for you is if you are on social media, we'd love for you to give us a quick follow. We have our LinkedIn, X, and as I mentioned, our YouTube channel. So these are all channels for you guys to follow us. We are posting updates and things that are going on with IBI out here. And as I mentioned, on YouTube is where you can find all the recordings from the webinars. And we will also be posting some training and kind of how to demo type videos to YouTube as well. So with that, that's all I had for you guys. After the meeting, you will receive a link for the evaluation form. It greatly appreciate if you would please take a few moments, fill that out. There's a lot of questions on there this time for we're starting to plan for 2025. So your feedback is greatly appreciated. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen somewhere here and turn it over to Santosh.
Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. Just let me know if you can see a deck that says key DQ features. Just confirm. All right, perfect. All right, thanks, Shay. Lots of good information there. It's already fall. You can see my colors. These are Florida Gator colors, and I have with me Steve helping me out with this virtual user group. We're going to play a couple of roles here, and you'll see how the flow how this flow goes and how we evolve through this entire process. So I just wanted to give you a quick recap of the two main features that's built for data quality in data intelligence. One is data profiling. The second is rules-based analysis. The difference between the two is profiling is where you bring in a data set and you just want to understand what kind of data variables or attributes you have in your data set. So this is basically a discovery exercise. You want to understand the data type. We have a function called data classification. It can give you a little more information. This is not just a string, but it is also email ID, for example. So you can do a lot of that using a profiling job. You'll upload your data set, you'll set up some user expectations, and the profiler will give you technical characteristics of your data type, class, uniqueness, completeness. It will also score that data profile based on your expectations of that data. There are other features there. There are some advanced insights you can run. I'm not going to go into detail on the profiling because that's not the purpose of this call. Today, we are going to only focus on the second half, which is after you have profiled, after you have understood what type of data you have in your data set. How do you take the next step to cleanse that data, to validate if the data represents the real world entity that you're expecting in that specific column or group of columns? How can you implement some automated fixes? So those fixes, those issues that you have identified can be automatically fixed through a piece of code. And in some cases, you may even use some reference data to enrich that data and provide that enriched output for your downstream consumption use cases. So there are two screenshots here. Profile is basically showing you what you would see as the report coming out of your profiling job. On the right side, you're seeing a couple of rules mapped, and this is exactly the exercise we are going to take in this session. We are going to show you how to map your rules, how to execute those rules, and what the output is. So the idea here for this session is to go a little more deeper into the development workflow. Now, with DQ, we package a lot of pre-built rules, and these rules can also be customized. You can create new rules, you can author new rules. It's a no-code UI. But what happens when you have a specific requirement that's not covered by a built-in service or a rule? What happens? How do you go about building your artifacts that can be used to create a rule that meets your specific DQ needs? So on the rules-based analysis, there are three important artifacts. And in this list, I also have put a note on the bottom. The reason why we are only specifically focused on Python is because there is a lot of out-of-box tools and support for Python within the product. However, you are not limited to just Python. You can write your own DQ logic in any language. You will have to run that application as a RESTful service external to data intelligence, and you'll have to register it. That flexibility is still applicable. But the purpose of this call is to show you how you can build very simple functions in Python and accelerate the time to deploying, registering, and making it available as a rule. So to that end, there are three specific artifacts that you need to consider. One is a Python function. It contains your core logic, where how do you want to cleanse your data, how you want to validate, fix, and enrich the data. In our example, we'll show you a function written in Python, which I will do a detailed code review, and the function is IDQ compare dates. Once you write that function and you deploy that script, you have the ability to register it as a service. Registration is basically telling DI or data intelligence that these are the expected. It's basically abstracting the DQ function from abstracting the logic of what you have implemented in the DQ function from how to execute that function. So you have to tell the system that in this function, we are expecting these inputs. These are the outputs that will be generated. These are the key value pairs that you can set up as parameters and so on and so forth. So it basically tells DQ how to process input data through that function. So when you go through that registration process, and Steve will walk you through that process, it's also there are two ways of doing it. You can do it through API calls, or you can use the UI to register a function. Once you have registered it, this service, now IDQ compare dates function, once it's registered, it becomes a service called compare dates. It's available in your registry of DQ services. And now you have made available a service, a very flexible service that can be used by a lot of business users to create their DQ rules. In this example, I've written a code called IDQ compare dates. What it does is takes two dates and compares the date value 1 against date value 2 using a comparison operator and provides the results. By the time you get to registering that service and making it available for your business users, they will start using this same service to build hundreds of rules. A couple of examples here. I've created a rule called bill versus paid, where I'm comparing bill date against a paid date. And I've set up a different format. I've set up a different comparison operator, less than or greater than. and I can reuse that rule in against different data sets. Different users can also use this rule. So there's a wide range of flexibility and portability that's built into this framework and is implemented in this three-tier architecture. That's first is you write a Python function, you register as a service, and then you can start building rules. The Python function that you have to write is only for specific scenarios. It's scenarios that are not covered by built-in Python functions. There are a wide range of functions that we have built and packaged with the product. And generally, most of our customers can just simply reuse those functions. They don't have to go through this exercise of writing a Python script. But if you have a specific need, we'll cover the process, the workflow in a lot more detail in this session. Um, I just want to bring out some of the key reasons why this new framework that we built and rolled out 2 years ago, how it helps our business users. We have this concept of consumers of DQ service who are in my architecture slide, if you refer to it. They are on the left side, and they're producers or developers of new artifacts that are on the right side. So the reason why we have this three-tier architecture or three tiers of artifacts is to left shift. We want to give a lot of reusability, agility to our business users. If you have a simple use case and it is already covered through one of the DQ services, you do not have to go back to a developer. You do not have to learn to code in Python to build those rules. So if you look at this grid, when you are building this Python function as a developer, your focus should be writing the most flexible, most reusable functions with a wide range of that's scalable across a wide range of use cases. When you deploy it as a service, you're basically separating the concern. DI doesn't need to know how you've implemented the logic. It just needs to know what is the standardized metadata? What are the inputs that you support? What are the outputs that the data intelligence service needs to know to parse the output and how to score it? And finally, for a business user, it's a no code configuration. If I have a service available to compare dates, I can create hundreds of rules by just changing a few simple parameters. I can make those rules available on the catalog for other users to use. It just simplifies and accelerates time to value for our business users. This is the typical developer workflow. So as a DQ analyst, you will go and you'll upload your data set, you'll go through the catalog and you'll start, let's say in this example, Steve's going to play the DQ analyst, and Steve's going to go and search for a rule. And if he doesn't find that rule, what does he do? If he has also the role of an author, he can create a rule, or he can find whoever is DQ rule author in your environment, he can make that request. So here on the top lane, the first thing you do is you try and find a DQ rule that applies to your specific scenario. If you find it, very well, you can map that rule to your data set and execute it and go through the analysis. If you do not find it, you go into the next level, which is basically searching for a DQ service and create a rule. And if you find that service, you can create that rule, you can pass on that rule name back to the analyst, and analyst can execute it. If you do not find a service, that's when you have to implement the underlying function. And again, I reiterate, Python is widely supported in the product, but that's not the only way to do it. If you have your own tool, if you have more comfort with Java or any other programming language, you can do it. But you will have to host that function. You'll have to create a RESTful application outside of the product. In this scenario, I'll bring in Steve so that we can do that role play. And then I will create a piece of code. I'll walk you through that code and then hand over that code back to Steve so he can deploy that as a service, create a rule, execute data through that rule. So Steve, why don't you give me a requirement? You're probably on mute.
I was. Why don't you let me share and I can dramatize that a bit.
All right, go ahead.
All right, I want screen two. Um, okay, is everyone seeing IBI data intelligence?
Yes, we are.
Awesome. First time. Okay, so I just got this new data file that has our submitted and approved dates for the big thing that we care a lot about. And so I need, as a data analyst, and I don't know if you noticed, I put on my glasses so that you could see I'm in the role of data analyst, um, to go through. And I'm going to upload this, and we won't spend a lot of time on it because this is IBI Data Quality 101. But what I do want to do is open this up, and very quickly, since this is a very simplified file, I'm going to run a profile. All right, let's look in here. I've got submitted dates and approved dates. And when I look at the frequency of values and the sample values we're showing here, I see that, look at that. In the most common mask, only 67% of my records actually were 4 digits, dash 2 digits, dash 2 digits, the YYYYMMDD format that I want. In the submitted date, I've got slashes, I've got trash characters. This is terrible. So first of all, I have a concern that my dates look terrible. I need them to be cleaned up and standardized on the format that we use. And the second thing is what's really important to me is you can't approve something until it's been submitted. So I need to compare these dates and verify that approvals are always on the same date or later than the submitted date. And so what I need to do here is go into the rules, and let's see what rules I can map into this. All right, got any date rules? Using this very effective search of my rule library. And let's see, I got this date cleanse that would probably help with the cleanup, and it works for both DMY and also DM and also MDY. It's got this verify age. I don't know what good that is for me. And none of this seems to compare. I'm hopeless. None of these rules are going to work for my use case. So as you just saw in that workflow, the next step would be, if I happen to be a rule developer, which I do, I guess glasses can come off for that, to see whether I've got a compare type rule. All right, ignore, I've got compare pair values, but that's not dates. And I've got this one, which you can't even see because that was preloaded to simplify something later in the demo. So the horrible truth is, I'm going to stop the share and say, I need to go to my Python developer, Santosh, to develop a new service for me that will allow me to compare two dates. And also, if I could get it in the same rule, it'd be great, because what I'd like to do is clean up the formatting of those dates as well. But
All right,
no, can you handle this?
I hear you. So your requirement is you got a lot of junk dates and you expect a specific format for those dates, and you also want to compare a pair of dates. It's not a simple requirement. But when you said you want submitted should be less than equal to approval date, in future you may also have other requirements, right? You may
You know,
want to
I
compare that the
could,
dates
because
are
you,
the
you you
same.
can't really have a paid date and that until you have an approval date. So paid date would have to, or approval date would have to be no, paid date would be greater than approval date. So
Okay.
yeah, I'd love to have that flexibility.
All right, I hear you. So as a Python developer, I'll start writing my code, but before I go into the code review, I want to just set up a few simple checklist things that our developers need to learn before they start writing a Python script. The first thing, this slide should be your absolute checklist. You cannot just write any Python script and deploy it in DI, because we have a specific requirement around how you structure your inputs, how you structure your outputs, what is the runtime environment, you have to follow this specific template. Number one is any function that in your Python script, you can have multiple functions. You can have some helper functions. There could be functions that are sub-functions that are called from the main function, but only those functions that you want to expose to DI need to have a prefix of IDQ. So that's the first item on your checklist. If you, in this example, you can see, when we define this function that we will write for Steve to compare dates, we will call it IDQ underscore. What happens is the system will parse out this function and recognize this is the function that needs to be registered in DQ as a service. Second, it has to be tested with Python runtime 3.11 because we are packaging a pre-built container where you host these Python scripts. It has to comply with the runtime environment we package with the product. Very, very straightforward. Third, and the most important thing is what we expect in this function are two minimum or maximum inputs. One is a CSV string. Read this CSV string as a string of comma-separated values with multiple rows. So if you have, in this example, we need 2 date columns because you have 2 date fields that we want to compare, and there will be multiple rows. So you have to support, your function must support 2 inputs. One is a CSV string, and the second is called parameters. It's a dictionary. It's a name-value pair. This just gives ultimate flexibility to your business users, how they want to compare. For example, if they want to create a rule with a less than equal to comparator, that's what goes into the name-value pair. So this function absolutely needs this signature with CSV string and parameters, which is a dictionary. On the output, again, you're generating a CSV string. You will have multiple columns that you want in your output data set. You can define whatever columns you want to be created out of this function, but there should be absolutely 2 columns that DI will need you to create. One is a tag value, and second is a tag category. Do not freak out because I'm going to go through the entire checklist as well as show you the code. But for now, use this as your compliance checklist. If you meet all of these requirements, you're basically creating a script that can be deployed in DI. Moving on, first thing that that bothers a lot of people, they ask this question is, what is the value of tag value, or why do you have to generate a tag value and tag category? This is part of our framework. And the reason we put this framework is to provide a lot of transparency into what goes on during the analysis. Tag values will help you identify any specific issues. We found a date to be invalid. We found a date to be missing. How do you capture that information and pass it to the end user? That's what tag value does. Anytime you find anything worthy of informing the user, whether it's an issue or an action that's taken. Action could be, I removed all the jump characters using this script. So you want to provide that insight to the end user. So you use those tag values to help end users understand what were the issues that were found and what are the actions that were taken. This is the one way you keep the DQ function from being a black box. The second one is the tag category. And the reason we have these 4, and these are the only 4 categories that are supported in this version of DI, you have to have every single input data row tagged with one of these 4 values. Valid is just whatever you sent as an input value is exactly the same that's coming out, and it's passed all the validation checks. Nothing was changed. We didn't even strip leading trailing spaces or remove any junk characters reformat. Valid is basically your data is really pristine, clean, good to go. Cleansed is wherever we find issues, like you'll see later on, we would remove some jump characters. We would see date fields with month and day swap. So we'll fix those things. And we'll be able to salvage. This is where we do a lot of automated fixes. We'll be able to salvage and convert a bad piece of date value and we can cleanse it, and we'll provide a reformatted, very clean, absolutely valid date as an output. And cleansed and valid are overall considered good things. Whenever you have a input data value that meets either of these two, they will improve your score. However, if you have empty values or invalid values, invalids are anything that went through all of these checks and we determined that it fails all of those checks that you have implemented in your function, there is no way to salvage it. For example, there is a date field with all junk characters. There are no numbers. There is no way script can fix that. So those would fall in that invalid category. The reason we want this summary is because of scoring. One, it gives you a very, as you can see on the bottom screenshot, you can see 70% of these values were valid, 10% were missing, and 20% invalid. Out of that 70%, 10% were also having junk characters or leading trailing spaces or seemingly invalid dates that we were able to cleanse and salvage. So you can see how these 3 or 4 categories help you do a consistent story. We always have this scoring framework from 0 to 100. 100 is the best, 0 is the worst. All of these stats are stored in our metadata repository, and you can create your own charts. You can create your own thresholds. Anytime you see more than 20% missing values, create an alert. You can do all of that only because we have this framework in place. So it's very important to understand that these two play a very critical role in capturing the metadata that comes out of your analysis, capturing the scores, and also running your any kind of DQ reporting or monitoring on top of the results. Okay, this is, so let's start with the script template. And this is my recommended template or our recommended template. It doesn't have to be this template. However, you'll see that this template will if you're a beginner programmer or you have a little bit of experience, but you don't know how to create your own templates, you can reuse our template. In our template, there are 4 distinct sections. One is on the top, you have to import some packages. These are reusable packages. Why rewrite code when there are packages available? Second is you define the main function. This is the function that you need to name as IDQ underscore. This is the function that will get registered. And usually what we do in this function is we read the inputs, we parse the input rows, we parse the dictionary values, we make a call to a sub-function that actually does the cleansing, verification, enrichment, and so on and so forth. And then this main function will then take all those results, reorganize them, and generate the CSV output that can be sent back. So that's the purpose of the main function. The main function, the code written in main function is highly reusable. I'll show you which lines of code you can just copy paste. There are like about 60 to 70% of the code that goes into a main function can be pasted into another function without making any changes. There are a few lines that you would have to change wherever your number of columns that you're reading is different from one function to another. On the sub function, you're basically going to write your business logic. It is if you're cleansing dates, you'll have a date function. If you are doing social security numbers, your logic will differ. You may want to verify, you may want to enrich, you may want to check for missing data. All of those logics or different steps you go through for your data validation, you implement it in the sum function. And also, this is where you start capturing what are the key findings. You start assigning tag values, and you would start summarizing the outcome of analyzing a row of data using the tag category. There is a concept of helper functions. Helper functions are within a script. If you're using a piece of code multiple times, create a helper function and reuse that or call that helper function multiple times within a script. It's optional. It's a good practice, and we'll show you how it works. But this is the recommended template. The script that we will run follows this template. The script that we show here will also be available for you guys to take a look at after this. Importing packages, if you're a Python developer or any programming language developer, you know what import libraries means. It's basically some essential packages that reduce the amount of coding you have to do. For example, we are importing CSVs and pandas for pre-processing, for parsing CSV string, or writing even CSV data. And then there are specific packages that we are importing, like regular expression, RE library, to remove junk characters, to check field against a specific regular expression pattern. We are using a date parsing utility, date util, one is to verify if it's a right date format, and second, to reformat to a desired format. Helper functions, I've used quite a few helper functions, but you can see this piece of code that I've written here is basically taking a regular expression. Let's say you were only expecting digits, slashes, dots. You pass that as a pattern string, and this helper function will just remove anything that's not expected from your input value and just give you a cleansed value. And this is reusable piece of code. If you have a different type of data value, all you have to do is change the pattern and pass that pattern to this helper function, and it should give you output that's cleansed. And every time you cleanse, you compare the input value against the output value. Okay, there's something that you did. You stripped some junk characters, or you remove leading or trailing spaces. The tag value just basically tells you I cleansed something, or you can change it to remove unexpected characters. Main function. And the main purpose of the main function, as I said, it's pre-processing and post-processing task. Is basically reading all the input columns in your data set, parsing it out, reading the parameter values, setting the parameter values, iterating through hundreds of rows in your data set, calling the sub-function, which is where your core logic is, and then taking the results, reorganizing it, and returning the output. This function is the function that we generally use to register in DI, and it's always going to be prefixed with the value IDQ underscore. Subfunction, this is where you will write your own business logic. This could be a list of steps that you want to perform. This will vary from your specific use case, from one use case to another. This subfunction is actually called from the main function, and we'll see that in a little bit. And that's about it. So let's take a look at the code that we have written for Steve's use case. Can everyone see a Visual Studio screen, a black and colorful screen? Just
yes, right there.
Perfect. All right. So if you can see, I took Steve's requirement, and I'm a really fast programmer. So while he was talking about the requirement, I wrote it up. I'm a very fast programmer. So this is a script that I will hand over to Steve so he can register it and implement it and make it available for business users to create their business rules. But I'll walk you through what I have done in this script. On the top, you find two imports, CSVs and pandas. You can absolutely copy paste these two lines in every single function that you create, because these are commonly used packages. These are the packages that we use to parse out CSV strings and to generate the CSV output. Then anything specific to your business logic, like right in this code, I'm using a date util parser to verify if the date is valid. I'm using datetime to get the current date. I'm using RE to do regular expression checks. I'm using operator to compare using the different comparison operators. So it all depends on what you're trying to accomplish. We generally recommend going to PyPy. You'll find a lot of pre-built packages. If those packages can run on 3.11 version of Python, reuse that code. Do not reinvent the code. I think that's one of the biggest advantages of Python. You for almost every use case, you'll find a package available. Then I have defined these 3 or 4 helper functions. The first one I already showed you. This one just takes a regular expression, applies a regular expression and removes anything unexpected in my date value. I'm passing this through another string in the main code, and it will just go and remove anything that's unexpected in my date value. Then there are a couple of things I'm also doing as a helper function. One is, since I'm supporting a list of comparison operators, what if the client that's calling this function passes something that's not supported in this? So I'm just handling it here elegantly. I'm going to verify that the comparison operator that you send, instead of greater than equal to, you send ABC, for example. That's not a valid comparison operator. There's nothing I can do to use that as a comparison operator. So I'll try to handle it elegantly in the code. Second, for the date format as well. The date format string, you can provide lots of strings like %y, MD. So these are some of the supported date formatting codes. If you send me something that's not in this list, obviously when I reformat the date, it's going to fail. So I want to elegantly handle that as a helper function. Every time you send me a format string, I'm just going to check if I can convert my current date time using that format string. If it's doable, then that's a very good format string to use for generating the expected or the desired date format. So these are 3 helper functions. Again, helper functions are optional, but you will see a lot of advantage of using helper functions, and you won't have to rewrite this code in your functions. Now, diving into the main function, this is the function, this is what gets registered in DI. Let's start with that. There's a lot of comments I made so that the person who is registering this function can understand the inputs, outputs. This is optional. This is a good practice, but as you go through this process, you'll learn what each of these different metadata that we have to set up for the service means. We'll go through that process, but this is something that we have commented for Steve to understand and implement in the registration process. The first line is basically I take in the CSV string and splitting lines, and I'm using the CSV reader package. You remember I imported CSV as a package. I'm using the reader, splitting out the lines. Second, I am expecting 2 parameters passed into this as a dictionary. One is date format, second is a comparison operator. If you forgot to set those up, I'm setting up some defaults here. You can change these defaults to whatever you want. If there is no value that's coming in date format, this is what the default format we'll use. Next, we are initializing the output list. This is the empty list that is being created. As you go through the validation, you'll bring the results and start appending to this list. This is where you will define all the columns that you want to generate out of this function as the output. So Steve's requirement has 2 input dates, and he's also wanting to convert these into a date format. And if I am successfully able to reformat those, I want to generate the output dates, that's reformatted input dates. And then I want to apply this comparison operator on input date and compare out date 1 versus the out date 2. And the results are going to go into the tag value and tag category. If the comparison is successful, it's a valid or cleansed tag category. If it fails, it's invalid. If it's missing, it's empty. And then the next step is, now that I have set up my output columns, I want to start reading each of the lines in my input CSV string. I'm expecting 2 values. If there is a completely empty line, I'm just setting up empty strings. So here, if you were expecting just 1 input field, you just set up 1 instead of 2. So these are lines of code that you can really reuse. This you can copy paste. This you can copy paste. This one is you replace the columns with whatever columns you are going to you are wanting to generate out of this function. Then you go through an iterative process. Before I go through the iterative process of calling the subfunction, what I'm also doing is the helper function that you saw before. I'm just checking if this comparison operator is supported. If it is supported, I want to go through the process of analyzing data. Otherwise, I don't want to waste time. I just want to throw out an error that this is an unsupported comparison operator. Hence, I consider this analysis or the analysis of this data set to result in an invalid outcome. Same for the date format string. Before I go through the process of verifying the dates, I want to make sure that the date format you've provided me is the correct date format. That dates can be parsed using that date format. If it is false, then I don't want to waste time. I just want to give this output unsupported date format. And once I have verified that all the parameters are supported, I'm down to action. Action may, for each row that I have, I'm going to iterate through every row, pull out date 1, date 2, pass that date 1, date 2 to this function that I have defined. This is an internal function. This will never be registered in DQ. This function is where you apply the magic. Magic bin, as you can see, goes through a series of steps. First one is stripping and removing unexpected characters. And I defined that using a regular expression. I used the helper function because if I didn't, I would have to write this piece of code twice. So you can see I'm sending the in date 1 and in date 2, and I'm getting a cleanse date here. If after cleansing these date values, let's say there is just ABC or just junk characters, and after stripping it, either one of these dates is empty, there's nothing for me to do. I can't compare those two dates. So what I'm going to do is just return the result that one or both dates are missing. If it passes that test, then I go into parsing that date. So each one of these dates, I'll use the date parser utility. I'll provide the output date. This is the cleanse date and the desired date format if I'm able to parse it. And sometimes the parsing will fail because let's say if your data has 29th of Feb of a non-leap year date, or it has 15/15 with the day and month are beyond the 12 months that's expected. So all of those cases, scenarios where the date parser fails, I'm just gonna track them and tag them as invalid because one or both dates are really invalid. There's nothing I can do to fix them. They are not valid dates. Either they are not valid calendar dates or they're not dates at all. And if I can get through that step, then I'm in the final step. I have two valid dates. I have a valid operator. I'll apply that operator. The result is either true or false. If the operator you sent is greater than and date 1 is greater than date 2, the result will be true. And if it's true, I'll say date comparison is successful. If it's not true, date comparison has failed. So you can see how we are using tag values and tag categories to capture every little insight that we gain during this analysis. We're feeding it back through a very standardized approach, which is tag values and tag category. Once I have this output list created, I send it back to the main function. The main function then organizes all of these input rows and the corresponding output rows and feeds it into a data frame, creates an output CSV, and returns that output CSV. At this point, we are ready to deploy the script. But before I deploy the script, I also want to test it. So I wrote two lines of code just to test it. Here I'm passing 2 date fields per row. The new line character just helps you understand that the next row is after the new line character. And I'm passing a date format. As you can see in my dictionary, I'm passing a comparison operator. I'm going to call that code. Okay. And as you can see, I'm getting the desired results. Some of these dates are really screwed up. There's a lot of junk characters, but you can see being able to comfortably extract the date values. In some cases, if it's 15/1, it changes it to 1/15 because there is no month called 15. So it's able to do a lot of these cleansing. And if it has cleansed, it's also telling me that I removed unexpected characters and the comparison was successful and the final outcome is cleansed. So with that, my code's ready. I've tested it and I'll hand it over to Steve and I'll check any kind of questions you might have. I'll be answering those questions while Steve takes you through the rest of the process.
All right. My trusty Python developing friend Santosh has sent me his script. And so I need to get this thing registered in IBI Data Intelligence. And let's see, I guess I click on Python functions here. Boy, that's intuitive. And ignore that for a minute. I'm going to register a new function. I'm going to find the one I just showed you, upload it. I'm going to call my script, let's see, for keeping things straight, VUG date compare. finish, and now I just have to vamp a minute because the process of uploading, installing, and registering that takes a second. And here it is. Okay, so I have a new module here, VUG date compare, uploaded, but it's not registered as a service, which means that DQ is not officially aware of it as anything but a module of Python code floating around disconnected from the universe. What I need to do is actually register this thing so that it can become a service and we can start putting it to work. So I'm going to click here and let's see, we'll give it a name like date compare. You'll notice, by the way, this is because I went at it as an uploaded Python script, it is hard-coded as a hosted service that I'm creating here. But we also mentioned we have a concept of external service. And so if a developer wanted to, I don't know, build an API in Spring Boot or do something clever with iWay Service Manager, as long as you have a service that implements our interface properly, you can register it and use it as an external service. Couple options here that are interesting but rarely used. Supports JSON is actually rather deprecated because we now have some intelligence in our system that allows any rule based on a service to be called with JSON input versus the CSV input. So we can write our functions to take CSV, but if we call the right endpoint, the translation will take place when we invoke it. Request full data set. Rules don't have to be simply, here is a data element, here is what I thought about it. We have some complex cases where we'll look at an entire file and say, detect outliers. What are the max and min in this and so forth. So if a service needs to look at the entire data set at once, we need to know that. Otherwise, the intelligence built into IBI data quality tends to batch things up for efficiency and send them, and even use multiple instances of the service container on the back end to speed that up. Another interesting case is it's possible to have a rule that looks at a single value and outputs multiple rows of output. For example, you might have something that was identifying keywords in a blob of text. I guess that would be a clob of text. But anyway, so it might take one big input and find 100 separate things that came out. So we just need to specify that. Again, this pretty much standard case that we're in leaves those alone. And then I would go through and enter I need to document my inputs. So let's see, we know the first input is date 1. Second input would be date 2. Save. And at this point, well, the first thing you should be asking is, how on earth do I know what to put here? And in this case, the answer is our helpful Python programmer gave me a very detailed comment explaining this, exactly what needs to go into each field. And the programmer who creates this will know it and should be able to communicate that. Maybe there's a future in which we have a more evolved metadata system and can populate more of this automatically. But for now, it's a matter of read the code or pick up the programmer and shake him until he answers. The second thing you're probably thinking is, do we really have to watch him type 50 values now? And you don't want to see that, and I don't want to do it. I kind of have typing in public anxiety. So I'm going to cancel out of here. And now we go to the pay no attention to the man behind the curtain pre-registered service. All right, so going through, we are creating the abstraction of the Python function as a data quality service that documents what goes in, what comes out, and any parameters that I can set when I create a rule to change the behavior of this particular service. So date 1 and date 2 go in, it outputs, tag value and tag category. As Santosh stressed earlier, that is absolutely required. I'm going to get my inputs back. I'm going to get the format that was applied, which is something I could look up, I suppose, but it's useful to see it right there in the result. Here are the cleansed output dates. Here's the comparison operator that was used. And finally, the test result is showing me what the result of the comparison was. If the statement date 1 is less than date 2 was true, test result will return true. A more avid typist than me probably should have filled in these descriptions with even more metadata so that the rule administrator, the rule author rule has more information in how to use this information. Here we have the part that you're really glad I didn't type in front of you, the tag values that our service can return. So there they are. And finally, the parameters that this service exposes, the date format and comparison operator. So
Could you, before you close that, just note here, the reason you have to spell out your tag values here is when you create a rule, these will be available for you to create a ticketing criteria. For example, you want issue to be created for a data steward to check with the data source why are one or more of my dates are invalid. You can use this tag to say anytime there are more than 10 values in my data set that have more than 10 values that are invalid, create a ticket. Or anytime you have 50% of dates that are unsupported, create a ticket. So these tag values, if you forget to mention them, those will not be available for your ticketing.
all right, that was a bit of a spoiler, Santosh, but I'll forgive you.
Oh, you were going to do that? Sorry.
But, so let's take our service here that now we have defined the interface for. And I'm going to, what would normally, if I were doing this from scratch for the first time, it would just bring me to this opportunity to do a quick test and make sure that the service as I have defined it is working as it ought to. So I'm just going to take the first value from my test file. And I'm going to say my date format is, and we know it's a Python date format, and I'm using dashes. So let's say, whoops, I need my percent. And the first one should be less than or equal to the second one because it's an approved and a submitted date. So let's just run a test and see. Okay, so we have invoked this function using the service interface that I just filled out. It is showing, I'm sorry, Santosh, I did forget to fix that typo. And I see my indate 2, the format I use. Look how magically it cleaned up that second one with all the garbage in it. The comparison was true because date 1 was less than or equal to date 2. We get 2 tag values back. 2, imagine that. Cleansed data values, yes, it did. We know that. And the comparison was successful. Date comparison was successful. And the tag category is cleansed because we did that cleansing. So it looks like our service is in good shape, but we still can't use it. So what we need is a rule. So let's create a new rule. And I'm going to call my rule YMD compare dates LTE, less than or equal. I bet you see where I'm going with that. And we're going to make this active right off the boat, off And let's see. Little metadata. Also, to make our rule library more helpful, and again, to give the data analyst more information on what sorts of things it can do, we give a lot of opportunities to fill in different metadata here to describe it. So let's see. I think dates don't really belong to a particular content group, but it seems to me that the data class it would apply to is probably something like date. Entities. Let's see, do we have a date in here? We don't yet. And it, again, I don't think date rises to entity. Country, if I were using a very specific national date format, it might be nice to make this applicable to, say, Andorra or American Samoa. Again, helpful to a data analyst who is looking for a rule that does just what is needed. And industries is agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, because that's what I always pick. All right, service workspace. So there are two kinds of services out there in the DQ world. There are the DQ core services, which are the ones that come in the box and we supply. And even though we supply a bunch of rules, a lot of our services are flexible enough to let you create new rules based on them. Right, the easiest example of that is we have a pattern matching service in which you supply it with a regular expression and it will attempt cleansing by way of matching against that regex. And there are an infinite number of possible regexes, so there are an infinite number of possible rules. But we're going in the custom, which is anything that I, as user, registered. And since I've only got the one service, it was easy to know which one I was looking for. And we will use the same stuff we tested with here. YMD date format, that's a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit date. And we're going to go with less than or equal to. And let's go for it. All right, now here's what Santosh was spoiling, is that at this point, I have the opportunity to say that I want, based on DQ scoring and based on the occurrence of some of these tags, the ability to raise a data quality ticket. That is a different topic, how that would be applied. But the concept is, man, if I see more than 10% of my input file has one or both dates invalid, that's some really lousy data, and I should do something about it, right? Date format string or date comparison operator, those are my fault as the person who defined the service. So not necessarily going to create tickets, but interesting. But also, if I saw that the date comparison itself failed, if a lot of my submitted dates turned out to be after my approval date, there's somebody I got to talk to. So there again, we want to be able to flag that piece of information and do something about it. So, all right, let's finish that. And now, here's my new YMD compare dates, less than or equal to rule. So let's try it. This, by the way, is the really exciting part. So if you've been dozing, wake up. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to take this, look through my rules for the one I just created. Date 1 is submitted. Date 2 is approved. We'll just leave the group name, just identifies the unit of these two data variables I'm passing into the rule. We'll save that, and let's run an analysis and see what happens. Look at that. I got a DQ score of 80. What does that mean? All right. It means in this case that 70% were valid, 10% were cleansed. And so pretty good, but going through, we do see that 20% are invalid, perhaps because dates are missing or because dates are invalid, things we couldn't manage to cleanse. 10% are missing. I'm sorry, 20% are invalid. The reason, I bet you're wondering why this doesn't add up to 100. And we've complicated it a bit by having multiple tags coming back. I'm realizing, but
it is fine. It's totaling up to 100. Valid plus invalid plus missing is 100.
Valid plus invalid plus missing, and 10% is cleansed as a separate piece of information.
Yeah, the 10% is part of the valid because it is overall a valid.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. So this actually comes out looking pretty good. And just for fun, I could go through, download my results. And if I go in here, you can see that here's the output as it was defined in the function and then in the service definition. Here are my in values, the format applied, same in every case here because it was configured in the rule. My output values cleansed, my operator, same in every case because it was configured in the rule. I got some trues and some falses as far as how the comparison succeeded or failed. Tag values compound in all cases here, I think, or no, well, most anyway. And then the ultimate tag category of valid, invalid, empty, or cleansed. Now, jumping on back, just to, whoops, wrong browser. This could also create the DMY compare dates GT, in which I'm going to compare DMY formatted dates that are greater than, where date one is greater than date two. I can fill in the metadata as needed. Take the same service, go with number of comparison operators, and the answer to that is a wicked lot, as we say up here in Rhode Island. So there again, a lot of flexibility coming out of a single script, a one-time operation registering that service. And at that point, once I have a good understanding of what that service is and what that can do, I can create rules with no code and use them in data quality analysis jobs. So that said, I think I'm going to cut it off, and we can take some questions. Someone asked about, is it needed to restart when you upload amended versions? The answer to that is no, but we generally suggest that that you kind of amend, rather than directly amending, you add a revised version under a new name and get rid of the old one, just so you don't have a disruption in service